Well, alright. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Space Age. I'm going to be up front. Unfortunately, all the footage that I recorded actually doing the retrofit to the vanilla stage that we did in the previous tutorial series has been completely corrupted. So we're going to try a little different format just to see how it works here. Obviously, for one, I'm showing my face. That's something, you know, that we don't do all the time, but we're going to do it this time just to kind of give a little bit of humanization to what we're doing here. But I wanted to go over some of the things that we did to actually change the factory and actually show things in real time as I'm talking about them to kind of hopefully try a different format and see if the explanation holds up a little bit better that way. So I've got some notes over here that I'm going to look at. I'm going to try to hit all the target points, and we'll go with that. So first off, I just want to say again, welcome to Space Age. If you have chosen to come here from the previous tutorial, really happy that you're here. Sorry that it's not going to be as high quality as we usually do. But you're definitely crazy for being here. Because Space Age is not for beginners. This is definitely the point that we're now hitting an intermediate stage in the game. Even if you have been playing vanilla for a long time, Space Age will challenge you in ways that you probably weren't expecting before. And that's okay. Just keep that in mind. There's going to be some new things here. So, first off, we're going to go down the list over here. I'm going to explain a couple things. We're going to go over a few of these changes that we've made to the actual factory. And if there's anything that I missed, please let me know in the comments below. And I will make sure to address them and answer any questions that I can with that. With that being said, let's just go ahead and get started here now. So, obviously we've refactored a lot. You could already see here where we are standing, instead of a single rocket silo, we have 4 rocket silos. We're going to discuss that in a little bit, but you're going to want a minimum of 4, trust me. So, one of the main things that's going to change about this is science. So, before, you would have your satellite that goes in here. Satellite gets loaded up, shoots off to space, comes back down to the cargo landing bay over here that we had. Notice that's also moved. We're going to show you where that went in just a moment. And then you just send the satellite up and it spits space science back down. It comes down with some space science that you then use for your infinite technologies in vanilla. A little bit different. You're going to have to actually process space science this time. So, before we talk about that, we're going to need a space platform. Now, space platforms are something that are very unique to Space Age. They kind of function almost like a spaceship, but they are definitely a space platform. There's a very key distinction with that. So you're going to want a couple of things. The main thing that you're going to want to start making right at the beginning here is you're going to want some space platform foundations. Now, you don't need a whole lot of these in the beginning, so you can see here I've limited a chest down just the first 10 slots right there. This is more than enough for a single player doing like a couple of basic stuff, especially because you don't want to make your platforms too big. Weight and size are actually something that you want to kind of limit as much as you can. You have a couple of constraints that you want to be dealing with there. So, you're obviously going to be unlocking this when you go to space science. You can see here there's a couple things. You'll get the rocket silo, which unlocks a lot earlier in Space Age than it does in vanilla. You'll notice that first off. And keep in mind, if you use your vanilla game and port it straight over here, you might have a little bit of differences in the technology trees. I do encourage people to start over a new save with Space Age with the knowledge that they learned from vanilla, but you don't have to do that. Just know some things might be a little bit different. So you do that, and then you have to actually create this space platform right here by creating a starter pack. We've already done that, so you're not going to get that experience with it, but I am going to send up a starter pack in order to show you what you need to do. But one of the things that you need to do before you can actually process space science is you have to actually build asteroid collectors. You got to get them up in space. Now, I'm going to show you how that process actually works so that you can replicate it yourself. Okay? So, very, very bare bone basics of the space platform is this foundation, and when you come up here, there is this thing called a starter pack. It's relatively cheap. It's only 20 steel, 20 blue chips, and 60 space platform foundation. Okay? This can be steel intensive, so hopefully you've got a pretty good steel setup, better than mine. Here's gonna be the biggest thing. You can choose any rocket silo that you want. It doesn't matter which one. We're gonna go with this one since this was the first one. You can see there's an automatic request from space platform option here. Normally you're gonna tick this on. For our case, we are actually going to tick this off. But you also see there's also a build new space platform right there. And all of these will have it even with the automatic. So I guess we don't need to untick it. But if you haven't ticked this, by default this is off. And then you just load this in. And then you can either deliver cargo, which in this case you don't want to deliver this. You want to build a new platform. And you'll see this says it comes with an initial 10 space platform foundations. So we're going to click this. And we come up to our satellite view. You can see here on the left-hand side where my camera is actually, unfortunately. We get a default name and then the planet that it's deploying to, which should just be in orbit around wherever you're at. And we can give this any name that we want. So we'll just type it in as my first platform. You might notice that we have a platform up here already. But we're going to get to that in just a bit. We don't need to worry about that right now. That is a finished platform that we'll be showing in just a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And then what will happen is this will immediately go ahead and launch itself up. And you can see up here there's a little my first platform. It's on its way. It's going to go on up. Just wait here for a second and then we'll get a little notification when it's done. And I always love seeing that. Okay. Now if we click on my first space platform, you'll see here, you are met with a woeful little expanse of nothingness. Your space platform has 10 foundations by default, and you can see there's a little bit of a core foundation around it. Now the way that space platforms work, and this is an important mechanic to keep in mind, the space platform is not dead unless the hub is dead. When the hub goes, the whole thing goes. So it is important to keep this fairly central or to the back of your designs if you can, because this is very, very important in any space platform design. Now, in order to build up here, it's very simple. You simply, in this case, you can just kind of hit Q to select something that already exists. In this case, space platforms. And you can do plus and minus to increase the size of the grid right here. If you've done anything with your stone bricks or your concrete, you will have done the same thing here. Okay, just keep that in mind. We can simply then just click, and this will then proceed to build out the ghost when it has it available. If it's not available, you'll then see over here there is a satisfaction on the way and available on planet. So what happens is back here, one of our automatic requests with drones will go ahead and load this up without us having to do anything. That will then proceed up to the requested station. In this case, this space platform hub, my first platform. And you will see it's going to arrive shortly here. It won't do anything until it arrives. And right there, we receive the package. And then the new material will come out to build the station. And it's a very satisfying process. And then anything that's excess from that load will be shown right there. You can also see right here in your information, anything that you're requesting, there's a stack size, but then there's a rocket capacity size. And what you'll notice is a lot of the times the rocket capacity for quite a few things is going to be lower than a normal stack size. In this case, it's half. So you're going to be launching a lot of rockets in order to feed something like this. Okay? Now, this is pretty normal, and if you ever decide that you don't like something, you just click your deconstruction planner, or Alt-D for short, and you can just click and drag in order to trim, like this. And then what that will do is it will put the materials back into your platform hub to be reused. It doesn't delete them, it just removes them, and then you can come in here and decide that you want to go out this way instead. Now, there are a couple of quirks with building in space here. You don't need to know every single one of them, but just know that you're going to probably encounter some constraints that you're not expecting, and that's okay. Now, one of the things that we need to do in order to really progress is we have to actually make our asteroid collectors. So to do that, you just tap E to bring up your normal ghost cursor stuff like you would in your satellite view. We're just going to click on a asteroid collector here, and you'll see there's a box around it. This box represents what the asteroid collector can actually collect. So we can see here that we can actually decide, oh, you know, we want to have it kind of try to cover as much as we can. But if I click anywhere, I can't build on that empty space, but I can do shift click. So I could have it come out, maybe let's say to a distance right here. And this won't build unless I bring it a platform. So in this case, we'll just come up like this. And you'll see, as soon as we can actually reach it and build it, we'll then kind of hook on, and we can see here it's still not quite building because, ta-da, we don't have an asteroid collector yet. We can see that there is a set of 10 on the way now, and as soon as that's done, this will then proceed to work and function as long as we have power. And power is the next thing. When you look at this, in order to look at your electric network, you need to click on the hub and then click this. And you'll see we don't have any power. Well, that's a problem, because asteroid collectors require power. So typically, what you'll start with are solar panels. This is why solar panels are actually still fairly useful. And you should be making these. As you can see right there, there's no power. So what we need to do is we need to come over here, and we need to provide some solar panels, which means, of course, that we need... That's a sneak peek over there. Which, of course, means that we're going to need a shipment of solar panels sent up here. So we're going to be getting that presently. And then we'll see our electric network will change, and then we'll notice a behavior of how the asteroid collector collects things. And then we'll notice the behavior of how the asteroid collector collects things here. And this is important to keep in mind. I'm showing this right now, and then we'll describe how the actual collection of the space science works. While we're waiting for the actual solar panels to be delivered, never mind. You can see here now the asteroid collector will collect anything within its zone of control. And then we're collecting chunks, asteroid chunks. Now, what kind of asteroid chunks do we have? If we come over to our wiki, which gives us a lot of information, some of it can be a little bit of spoilers, but we can mainly come over here to look at these small asteroids, and then we can look at the chunks. These are the main things we want to look at right now. So we can see here that a chunk, high metal content, and then we can see there's some recipes here involving these three things, and then promethium chunks later, much later on that one. We're going to only focus on these main three because we're just up in Nauvis. We're not going to worry about actual full asteroids. So we have these three chunks. So we have to collect the chunks, but then we also have to pull the chunks out. In order to pull our chunks out, we'll be using inserters, just like you normally would anywhere else. So we'll just take our inserters, and we'll just delete that, and we'll simply pull from there, which means that we also need to be able to put it somewhere. In this case, what we can do is we can actually put it onto a belt. In our case, we're just going to do a simple red belt. Now, space is limited in space, go figure. So what we want to do is we're just going to use belts to give us some extra space, like so. Kind of like a round robin lazy Susan type of setup here. Because there's a little bit of space inside the platform, but that's limited, so we want to use some of the stuff out here. Now, as part of the design process here, we can also choose to put some in. So we can do like this, and holding shift click will automatically place foundations beneath. And when the belts come up, we can now see we have chunks coming onto a belt, and now being stored on said belt, and freeing up the collector to collect more chunks. Now, of course, we can store and we can pull from the hub. But here's something important to note. You cannot stack asteroid chunks, unfortunately. They are not stackable, so they are not very good to actually put inside here. It's much better to put them out on belts. So with that in mind, let's now go ahead and return those by simply coming over here, and we'll just whitelist those chunks back out, and we will return them to the belt. Pretty simple that we can manage that. We can also use circuits, and you're going to want to learn circuits. So here we go. This is what a finished platform looks like. Now, there's a couple of things that can be improved upon with this platform, but suffice it to say, this is something that's going to work pretty well. There's a couple of advanced things we're going to talk about here, and it's important that we actually cover them because you're going to be using them later on. So the main thing that I want to talk about with this is that you're going to use your collectors just like we did before, but we're also going to limit what's actually inside of our collectors because we only have so much space. We're going to also limit what's on the belt. So you can see here there's some little rails around here because we're reading the belt. Then we're also going to be using crushers for each type of resource where we want to crush as much of it as we can and then send it down the line. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can improve the quality of this. For starters, you'll notice that we have an abundance of metallic and carbon asteroids, but we don't have a lot of the oxide asteroids. And if we were to zoom out here, we can also see we're not seeing a whole lot of them floating around here. So what gives? Well, you're not always going to get an even distribution of chunks everywhere that you go, and Nauvis is no different. So what you can do is you can actually choose to reprocess some of these with technology to get better chances at other stuff. But for your basic stuff, don't worry about trying to get all of that maxed out. You are going to be research locked on it for one. This is going to work out just fine. However, we do want to do a little bit of circuit logic. So there's a lot of wires going everywhere, but most of them are going to be pretty straightforward. For starters, every asteroid collector possesses one decider combinator, which has a red wire going into the input and a green wire to the output. And what we're doing here is we're just taking everything and we're reading anything that is less than 11. We're then going to output a signal for that. Now, there is one problem with this that I already noticed, and I'm not sure how I didn't notice this before. We're actually not even setting a filter for oxide asteroid chunks, which means we're not catching them at all. So that's a good catch that I made. We're going to adjust that a little bit. We're going to have a default value of 1 set for all of those things, right? So if we come around, we could see how could we actually attach these. What we can do is do a green wire to keep things separate. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just chaining a green wire and using inserters as a go-between. And I want to do a green wire because I am separating the circuit networks away from what's actually there. So this is just going to be something that is used to share a common value between all of these things, but not bleed into everything else. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry. It will in just a moment. So what I'm doing right now is I'm making sure that all of my decider combinators are hooked up with a green wire. I'm then going to request a decider combinator be placed right here, separate from everything else. And I'm just going to attach to that same green wire. And what I'm now going to do is we're going to set a base value for an oxide chunk of 1. And we're going to do the same thing, a base value of 1 for carbonic and for metallic. Now what you're going to see is now we have something that we're comparing against, right? We're comparing against all of this combined, essentially. Now, the other problems you can see here, there's a read of 27 on the red wire. That's following up pretty well over here. This one probably just didn't get its stuff sorted out. So this one's full and can't accept anything right now. And that's okay. because that happened early on. Most of these will still have a little bit of space, and then we'll be able to eject some of what they've got. Ideally speaking. As long as you can collect some oxide asteroid chunks now, that's what we're looking for. So you're always going to make little mistakes like that. I forgot to add a little bit of that there. So then we come back over here, we'll see here, this is saying 12, 11, and 111. So when I'm saying 11, what I'm really checking for is the value that I put in by default, and I'm going to hit that limit right there as well as with this. So we're actually looking at 12, technically speaking, a little bit, right? Which is going to round out to 10, a little bit. So, with all that in mind, the basic process is that we put all of these on the outside belt, so that we have room on the inside belt if we want to do some other stuff with it. We then take from this belt anytime that we could fit in metallic chunks, carbonic chunks, and oxide chunks. There's a recipe here for crushing. And you see here we get 5 ice and then a 20% chance of getting another chunk back. Because of that, this is why we set the belts up like this. We put everything onto this belt, we separate the chunks to go back onto the belt to get reprocessed later. And then all the ice blocks instead will now come down here with everything else and start to get processed into space science packs, which take ice, iron plate, and carbon. So oxide and carbon are able to just go straight from crushing to research. But we have to take the iron ore that we get from the metallic chunks, we have to actually smelt those, and then send those down. And then we just throw down a bunch of solar panels wherever they'll fit, until we get enough to power everything constantly, because we don't actually need batteries, because we're static. And that's the basics of a space platform for space science. Now, here comes the tricky part. You gotta research with it. Coming back down here, this is our new science station. It's a little large, and this isn't exactly the most efficient setup that we have right now. But we do have some beacons over here and honestly, some efficiency modules. That was when we were transitioning to our nuclear power. But now that we have nuclear power, we don't actually need those efficiency modules. We can go back to speed modules instead. But you can see here that we've actually put our cargo landing pad right over here next to it. And we have a couple of inserters for later. You see here that we'll take a shipment of space science. It comes down here, and it will queue up to then get loaded onto its respective belt until it can't fill it anymore. And then everything is just going to pull wherever it can on these belts as they come by. We do this sort of a looping thing to make sure that we don't have any static science anywhere, and we're able to have it go through and eventually get picked up at any time. Right now, this is using red belts, but we will upgrade this to blue belts in order to make sure everything is going as fast as possible, gets picked up by the next available station. And this is why we had to sit here and talk about this, because this is a big change that we did, and it takes a long time to explain it. Now, let's go and talk about nuclear. Nuclear is something very interesting that we didn't cover in the beginner series either. To start with, you have to mine uranium. And to mine uranium, you require sulfuric acid for the process. We were fortunate enough to have a uranium patch right next to the starting area, so we've been taking advantage of that, mined up some, and then you have to take it through this. The nuclear process, which is the basic one, and then eventually the enrichment. Now, this isn't all set up to be completely autonomous yet, but it's going to be now that we have space science, and I'll explain why in a moment there. But essentially what you do here is you have to brute force a little bit to get some of the uranium-235. 238 is kind of your technical waste product, but you can still use 238 for a couple of applications. But you want to start with 40 235 to come over here to what's called the Kovarex enrichment process. Now, this process is very unique. If we look over here at the uranium processing, every time that we process 10 ore, we will get a 0.7% chance at uranium-235 and 99.3% uranium-238. Okay? Very low odds of that, which is why we did about 6 of those in tandem. This takes a little bit of time, so you got to set this up early, because then you can come over here to the Covrex enrichment process, which is a little bit slow, so when you scale this up, you want to have more of these. But you're going to feed it 40 235 and 5 238, and then you'll gain 1 235 and 2 238 back. So essentially you're spending 3 238 to create 1 235. And when you think about that, with the massive amounts of 238 you're going to get out of this, this is going to become functionally infinite power. Especially when you come over here to your uranium fuel cells and realize that 1 235 will make 10 fuel cells. And each fuel cell is worth 8 gigajoules. And that is quite a bit. That is quite a bit. So, how do we actually use these to generate power? That is where the nuclear reactor comes in. So, this is big, this is intimidating. But we're going to look at one section. Think of it as looking at a quarter of it. So we're going to kind of come down and just look at this going out this way. To start with, a nuclear reactor is going to take fuel cells and it's going to generate heat. So, with that heat, we're going to use these heating pipes here, and then we're going to actually transfer heat into these heat exchangers, which will then take that heat, boil water, turn it into steam, and then the steam comes over into these turbines to actually be converted into power. So, the way that we do this is where we circuit control it a little bit. Click on any one of these, you'll see that we are reading the temperature. So the temperature right now is coinciding with the temperature, you know, that we see down here. T equals 656 and falling. So why do we have it falling? Because we come down here and look at our fast inserter, we are reading the temperature level and we will only add in 1 fuel cell when we hit that 575. Now we're going to have a couple extra here because this isn't fine-tuned, this is just a simple setup here. For ease of use, basically. And I explained that in my now corrupted footage. But essentially, we're now going to request the system bring us some fuel cells to place in here. And then anytime that the temperature gets too low, we throw those in to any of these to up the temperature, spike it up, and make sure that we are able to maintain a steady flow of energy at all times. Now, here's something to talk about. You can see right here that when you look at the output, there's a neighbor bonus. So a neighbor bonus is something that happens whenever a nuclear reactor is adjacent to another nuclear reactor. This doesn't work diagonally, this only works in like a full tile connection. So we have this one and this one have a neighbor bonus with each other, and then this one and this one. So you have a double neighbor bonus between each of these. So every neighbor that a nuclear reactor gets gives it a neighbor bonus of 100%, or double, basically. Well, double for the one, and then it goes up from there. What this means is that in order to calculate how you're going to use all these, you can have these 4 together, and then assume that each of these, when they're all turned on, have a neighbor bonus of 200%. So, what that means is that we go from 40 megawatts apiece, mathing a little bit here. We go from 40 megawatts to 80 megawatts, then from 80 megawatts to 120. So then you have all 4 of these put together, you're then going to be generating 480 megawatts of nuclear energy. Okay? So, in order to do the math on how many of these steam turbines you actually need, you will then look at how much energy one steam turbine can actually output, because that's also how much it's going to consume in heat, basically, and steam. And what we can determine from there, basically, and I already did the math for this one, I went with 84 steam turbines. That's a little bit more than what I need because I wanted things to be a little bit symmetrical. Not super symmetrical, but a little bit. And then we just added some accumulators all through here. The most important thing here is to ensure that your steam is able to reach everywhere. In this case, we don't have them reaching over to the opposite side, we just have them split. So one half of the steam goes here, the other half goes over here. I've never had a problem with this. So as far as I can tell, this will work. And you can see right here, right now, we've got a neighbor bonus because we have an active nuclear reactor where it's consuming 40 megawatts, but the output is 80 megawatts because of the neighbor bonus right now. And that'll only get greater as we look further and further along with all these. In fact, I'm wondering here, 575, 604. Sometimes some of these won't get like their full use here, but they'll have enough fuel basically to last for a while. So that was the two major changes that we made. Everything else is going to be just kind of small things. We added some more trains, and we added some more mines in a couple places in order to gain more iron with a couple of logic things with that. We're not going to cover that today because we're going to cover that next time. Because this is the hint right here. This is a train depot. And again, this is going to be intermediate stuff, so we're getting more and more complicated. But this is going to be a setup that will allow us to actually store ore trains and have all of the ore trains work together to service any station we want, which means we're going to have a lot of trains. And that means that our interrupt system is going to be used a lot more. But that'll be next time. So, I know this was a lot to go over, and I do apologize that I had the corrupted footage. I'm going to pray that my newer drive is going to work a lot better than the older drive did, and I don't have any more of that corrupted footage. And additionally, I'm going to make sure that we have a higher quality explanation with the train stuff, because the train stuff, you're going to want a lot more information on that. So once again, if there's anything that I didn't cover and you're not happy with what you're seeing here, do let me know, because it will help me to improve it in the future. We are going into much deeper topics now, so transparency and clarity is going to be very important, very important. There's also like multiple things that we have to upgrade still, but since we had lost that footage, I felt like I still needed to put this video out because I promised that I would, and now we're at a good ground zero to then carry forward. So once again, thank you guys for watching, and if you wouldn't mind, hit that subscribe button. We are trying to grow the channel, and if you like what you're seeing, like, comment, tell me what you like. If you don't like what you see, dislike, and tell me what you don't like about it so that I can improve on it later. And we will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.